is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
It's Tuesday. Welcome to it, my friends. It's the Steve Gruber Show. Summer is on its way for us. Yeah, a big blast of it coming this week. Temperatures into the high 80s across much of the state today. Just beautiful for the next couple of days here. Into Thursday, Friday, and the holiday weekend, well, temperatures could touch 90. That could happen in a lot of places today and tomorrow. Could happen again on Labor Day itself. So some 90s mixed in. Haven't had 3 days in the 90s any place in Michigan that I've been for. This will be the third year. So having multiple days in the 90s will make some people scream global warming. It'll make me just say, look, summer's back. And good for the farmers because it'll help mature their crops quickly. So that's good news. Anyhow, a lot going on here, and I'm just trying to decide where to start with you this morning. I think I'm going to start with my favorite embattled Republicans, Todd Courser and Cindy Gamrot. Deeply flawed in a variety of ways, but a report coming out yesterday doesn't seem to deter Todd Courser. He's not going to go down without a fight, it seems. Courser yesterday released a 4,100-word statement by email challenging what he called an abridged and doctored report released earlier in the day by the House Business Office. Part of this comes from an MLive report. Given I have not been able to see the evidence against me, I can't really comment on it, he wrote. I can only speak from what I know from the sanitized report that was just released and what I have heard in the media myself. The summary report of a recent investigation by the nonpartisan House Business Office says Courser, a Republican from Lapeer, and his colleague, Representative Cindy Gamrot, a Republican from Plainwell, misused taxpayer resources in an attempt to hide their extramarital affair, among other issues. While Courser acknowledged he is responsible and culpable for his actions, he raised several questions about the motives of the players involved in the report, including former staffers and House Speaker Kevin Cotter, also a Republican. Most notably, Courser asked, am I being targeted as a form of political retribution? Listen, he was no favorite of anybody there. And he came in like a bull in a china shop. He's a Tea Party favorite, a social conservative, boasting that he has voted against his party many times and challenging the progressive steps of leadership on gas tax bills and the state budget. Given my voting and my advocacy for conservatism are among the best in the legislature, maybe I shouldn't be surprised that I'm being singled out and put on the fast track of expulsion. And right there I say, stop. You're being put on the fast track to expulsion because of reckless behavior. Period. Let's remind ourselves, Todd, that it was you that had the extramarital affair. It was you that combined in a most unorthodox way your staff so that you and Cindy could spend more time together. It was you, Todd, that made up a story to disseminate about having a sexual liaison with a male prostitute in an alley behind a nightclub in Lansing. This was your grand idea. So don't blame this on conservatism. A true conservative probably wouldn't be in this place. Think about that for a moment. Kevin Cotter, that is, ordered this probe back on the 7th of August after audio recordings were released by a former staffer that revealed Courser plotted the fake emails trying to accuse himself of a non-existent affair with a male prostitute, thinking that would somehow take the light off from him and Gammert's affair. They have both. And this comes from the summary report released yesterday. They have both engaged in deceptive, deceitful, and outright dishonest conduct. Period. Todd, that seems to be the truth. And Todd, you've been invited numerous times to be on this program. And where are you? You told me you're not afraid to come on this program and discuss all of these issues. That was nearly 3 weeks ago. I don't expect you to come. That would actually take courage. In fact, I'm to the point of just being over it and over this snowstorm of nonsense. Michigan Republican Party Chair Ronald Romney McDaniel joined Cotter in calling for Courser and Gammert to resign, only a month after I made that call. Courser, calling it a confession of sorts, disclosed he has a heart condition that sometimes can make it feel as if he's going into cardiac arrest, which means who knows what. The condition, he suggested, explains some of his missed committee hearings and seemingly unusual behavior, such as lying on the floor during a staff meeting. In his email, Courser noted expulsion is a rare step in Michigan politics, and he questioned whether allegations made against him rise to that level. The accusation he conducted political activities on state time is a matter that might normally be remedied by review from the Secretary of State. I'm just going to leave you with this. I can only hope that the other reps who are delivering their political fundraising flyers throughout the House daily, this is okay because their staffers are made to do it on their own time, and it's a complimentary invitation for other reps asking for campaign donations, have followed the rules that I will be accused of violating. Like many Democrats, Courser again questioned what Cotter knew about the situation. Former aides to Courser and Gammert had shared some concerns with Cotter's chief of staff, Norm Sari, but the summary report indicated Cotter had no prior knowledge to lawmakers might be misusing taxpayer resources. Again, my opinion is simple. When you're unable to do your job that you're elected to do because you have lost the trust of everyone, it's time to move on. It was time for Todd Courser and Cindy Gammert to move on some time ago. For some reason, my gut tells me she'll be the first to resign. She's a fool to stick this out. And Todd Courser appears to be too stubborn for his own good. I guess we'll just keep an eye on how that breaks down. But it's clear that these two have distracted the Michigan legislature at a time when we need to be focused on fixing Michigan's roads and finding solutions to making sure our infrastructure is taken care of. This distraction has made them vulnerable to legitimate criticisms now from the left. Criticisms about their work or lack thereof during this circus-like period. It's time to move on. It's time to do it quickly. Time for the expulsion to happen. If they won't step down honorably, it's time for expulsion to happen and happen now. It's Tuesday on the Steve Gruber Show. The phone number 888-900-9966. Welcome to it.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
I gotta get down. I gotta get down. Gotta get down to the
All right, it's Tuesday, my friends. Welcome to it. It's the Steve Gruber Show.
You keep me up just
Members of the State Department's Information Technology staff, the IT team, were among those who were unaware that Hillary Clinton was using a private email address during her time as Secretary of State. That's the indication from the latest release of messages from Clinton's private server. In one email dated February 27, 2010, an IT worker on the State Department's computer help desk sends a message to Clinton's email address inquiring about why one of Clinton's correspondents had been getting a fatal error when she tries to send messages to the Secretary of State. Clinton forwarded that email to her top aide, Huma Abedin, asking, "Do you know what this is?" Abedin responds, "Your email must be back up," and explains that a woman named Judith tried to send Clinton an email and called it the department's IT team when the message was returned to her. "They had no idea it was you," Abedin writes to Clinton, "just some random address, so they emailed. Sorry about that, but regardless means your email must be back." Clinton's use of a private email address may also have created logistical problems communicating with State Department aides. "Well, it's clearly a state versus outside email issue," wrote Abedin in August 2010 after another aide reported missing some messages from Clinton. State has been trying to figure it out, so it is getting all of your emails because she's on her personal account too. The State Department released 7,121 pages of emails from Clinton's server late yesterday, the fourth and largest release yet since a federal judge ordered the department to undertake monthly releases of the approximately 55,000 pages of emails Clinton turned over to the State Department last year. The last batch of messages is expected to be released in April. Clinton and her presidential campaign have repeatedly denied that she inappropriately handled classified information, of course, while she was the Secretary of State. A question that is currently the subject of a federal investigation, too, by the way. The latest release also contains messages related to Clinton's iPad, which arrived in June 2010. Aide Philip Raines informed her that the device had arrived, to which Clinton responded, that is exciting news, Do you think you can teach me to use it on the flight to Kiev next week?" So here it is. Hillary Clinton is just continuing to flounder in this mess. And her poll numbers are taking a beating. Joe Biden is on the cusp of getting into the race. She's, trust me, this is troublesome. On the other side, on the Republican side, Donald Trump, in an exclusive interview with Breitbart News, the GOP frontrunner is firing back at the Club for Growth. Well, I bring this to your attention because coming up here in just a few minutes, we'll have Doug Sacklebane, Communications Director for the Club for Growth, here on the program. And Trump called them a pack of thieves. He had just finished delivering a high speech to an overflow crowd of about 1,000 people. Trump was attending the annual conference of the National Federation of Republican Assemblies, a grassroots Republican wing of the party. The Club for Growth came to my office looking for money. I turned them down. That's why they're after me, Trump told Breitbart. Earlier in the week, the Club for Growth attacked Trump for his proposal to penalize Ford Motor Company for putting car manufacturing plants in Mexico rather than Tennessee. We'll talk about that after the break. Donald Trump's threat to impose new tax on U.S. car companies will hurt the American economy and cost more American jobs, said the president of the organization. Again, Doug Sacklebane will be here in just a few moments to discuss the Club for Growth and what their situation is with Donald Trump. Hey, trust me, you're going to want to see this interview. You'll want to know this whole score. Let's see here. Also in the headlines is the race for the Arctic. As you know, the president himself is in Alaska, the first sitting president to ever be north of the Arctic Circle. President Obama will ask Congress today to speed up the construction of new icebreaker ships. Now, this is actually interesting. In order to protect the United States' interests and resources in the Arctic, amid growing concern that the U.S. has ceded influence to Russia in the strategic waters. The proposals will be made on the second day of Obama's 3-day trip to Alaska, during which the president has focused largely on, you guessed it, climate change. The president said, I'm surprised he's not getting out, permits to get windmills and solar panels up in the Arctic, but he's actually asking for icebreakers. Now, why would you even need an icebreaker? Pretty funny, huh? The president's agenda called for him to travel to Seward. Nice town, by the way, where he planned to hike to Exit Glacier and tour the Kenai Fjords National Park by boat. Also nice places. I've been to both. Concerns about Russia's activities in the Arctic have grown after Moscow submitted a claim to the United Nations in early August for 463,000 square miles of the Arctic sea shelf, extending more than 350 nautical miles from the nation's shore. The Arctic is believed to hold up to 25% of the world's untapped oil and gas supplies, and the U.S., Russia, and Canada are among the nations trying to assert their jurisdiction over the region. So, if the president's actually going to defend American interests in the Arctic, well, that's good news. Despite the immense stakes, the Obama administration acknowledged in a fact sheet about the president's proposal that the U.S. Coast Guard icebreaker fleet is inadequate to handle the possible challenges from Moscow. There you have it. We'll keep an eye on all of this for you. And again, Doug Saclamane with Club for Growth on the way here on the Steve Gruber Show.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
Unless you live in a cave or under a rock somewhere, you pretty much can't avoid the runaway train we call Donald Trump. For years he had threatened to become a candidate for president of the United States. Did the same thing this year, and I don't think anybody really took him too seriously. And then suddenly he jumped in. Said some things that rubbed some people the wrong way, and his numbers went up. Then he said some more things that rubbed people the wrong way, and his numbers went up. And they continue. In fact, now he is by far the leading candidate for the Republicans, dominating the race nationally and in individual swing states. But it's not sitting well with everyone. Doug Saclamane is a communication director for the Club for Growth, and he thinks that Trump's calls for higher taxes on places and companies like the Ford Motor Company could spell big problems if he actually got the nomination. Doug, welcome back to the program.
Steve, thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
So you're not a Trump fan?
No, it's hard to know what you're being a fan of when it comes to Donald because you just don't really know what it is that he's putting forth. I mean, this is a little different from the Ford thing, but earlier this week he talked about flat tax and what a great idea it was, and then he said, but I really don't like the lower-income folks having to pay the same percentage, and so probably would want to change the percentages a little bit. Well, we have that. It's called a progressive tax system, and so it's that kind of mentality that you really don't know what it is that you're standing for or cheering for.
Well, he's really rich. So he says that at every stop. But okay. It's fair to say he has some business acumen. He has acquired $10 billion. He's become very successful. He has run some very big and successful companies. He's done well on television. And now it seems he's doing pretty well in politics. But I think America does identify, at least a large portion of Americans identify, with somebody who just says, here's what I think, and doesn't think a lot about, the polls or how it's going to affect him in the next debate. He just says, this is what I think, this is where I am. And shooting from the hip and being honest and accountable, and no teleprompter and no question off limits, even for Jorge Ramos. He brought him back into the room, and his numbers go up. America likes something that they're seeing.
Those are all positives. You're absolutely right. We're sick of the system where talking points seem to run the day, and these candidates seem to want to be focus group testing the kind of things that they say. And with Donald, we're getting pretty much shooting straight from the hip. But you go back to the proposal that he repeated again in Iowa earlier this week, and this deal with Ford, where we're going to tax every car, truck, and part that comes back across the border at 35%. Boy, that's just on at least two levels. First of all, the free trade level that now sets up trade war style tariffs and now drives up costs, which when you've got a lot of wealth, maybe that's not such a big deal. Maybe it's okay to kick the ladder out from behind you once you've gotten up there. But free trade benefits a lot of people in terms of jobs and as being consumers. And then the other issue that's really troubling about that is I'm not sure we want to have our president calling up a major global company, a huge employer of Americans, and saying, you can't do this. You can't move your company here because I'm going to tax you to death if you do it, and forcing them to work where he wants them to work. We've had 7 years now of the pen and phone sort of approach to executive orders and doing what the administration wants to do, and we've all gotten a little frustrated with it.
Well, fair enough, but we've had 20 years, some would argue, and many would wonder, I'd be in that wondering category myself, of did we really benefit from the North American Free Trade Agreement? That, I think, was 1995, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. 20 years on. And so people in Michigan, I can tell you, folks around here, like, we got the raw end of that deal. So when Trump comes out and says, you know, if Ford wants to move another big factory to Mexico, there's going to be a price to pay for that. And some people say, I'm on board with that.
I think the bigger picture on these kind of things, and it's always easy to pick out particular ones. You know, China, of course, is the one that's most hated. And you mentioned NAFTA. People can find things that are clearly wrong, things where other sides don't play fair. But the bigger picture on free trade is it helps our country. We are a country that gets our iPhone and all the parts that go into that iPhone into the realm of the affordable, at least reasonably affordable, because there's free trade, because those parts can come into our country. And I think we need to be careful that we don't take this protectionist point of view that ultimately has a broader effect on jobs and the economy that's detrimental if we start fighting and causing costs to rise on the things that we want to buy here in America.
That's a fair point, but I guess all eyes better remain on Donald Trump because, Doug, everybody seems to want to count him out, but every time he gets counted out, he counts himself a little bit higher in the polls and higher in the polls and higher in the polls. And I guess this probably won't be the last time we have this conversation because, you know, he continues to thrive.
He does. You know, we were just talking about this here, and our president from our organization is just working on putting out an op-ed piece. And a lot of this goes back to, we think, and I think a lot of your listeners will agree, with Republican leadership here in Washington. People are fed up with establishment Republican leadership. They're sick of what the promises they were getting a year ago going into 2014 gave the Republicans the majority in the Senate, gave them the largest House majority in over 80 years, and are looking at it going, so what did we get for it? And so if you're weighing the unknown, which is very vocal right now, that Donald Trump in the sense that we don't really know what he'd do, and people are looking at the unknown that sounds really good, or the known that they know is timid and weak and unwilling to fight, I think that explains in some sense anyway why folks are more inclined to say, I'm going to take a chance here.
Doug Sacklaven on the phone, Communications Director for the Club for Growth. Well, I guess my point to play devil's advocate here again is, and we don't know what these politicians are going to do either. They always make all sorts of promises about how they're going to do this or that or everything under the sun, and it doesn't turn out that way. I bring your case in point, November 2014, a big sweeping election victory for the Republicans. We're going to do this, and yeah, whatever. You know, people are just sick of the willy-nilly. They'll buy it this time. Meanwhile, we're 18, 19, $20 trillion in debt. Something's got to be done. Something has to change. I don't know if it's Donald Trump, but I'll tell you, I'm watching him thinking, you know, my question is, why not Donald Trump? Is he really any better or worse than anything else out there? What do you say?
Yeah, fair question, Steve. I mean, and that's I think the dilemma that we're facing, because even on a lot of these issues, exactly what you're talking about, the national debt, we're not hearing serious proposals. I would, as I look at the field, there's some candidates that the Club for Growth has said we like these folks on pro-growth issues. They've done well on these issues, but you know, you look at Senator Paul, for instance, who's really languishing in the polls, who we've said we think he's a pro-growth candidate, has put forth some great budgets that actually bring the budget, you know, to balance in a much shorter time than anything we've seen, and begin to attack the deficit. And that message just doesn't get picked up. I mean,
no, Rand Paul's campaign is over.
Yep.
I'm telling you, it's over.
And sadly, with it goes that very discussion of what needs to be done to actually shrink the size of federal government. We're not hearing constructive proposals on a widespread basis, and maybe that's the nature of the questions the candidates are getting. We're certainly not hearing it from Donald. And that's troubling because that's the kind of things that are going to affect us long term, and they just don't seem to find a place in the regular day-to-day debate.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately they don't. Doug Sacklaven, I appreciate the conversation, and like I said, we're going to have it again because the outsiders, be it Trump or Dr. Carson or Carla Fiorina, they seem to be at the top of the polls, and America wants something different. Are they going to stay there? I don't know. I can't say for sure, but that's why I say we'll talk again, my friend.
Steve, always a delight. Thanks for having me on.
There you have it. Doug Sacklaven, the communications director for the Club for Growth here on the Steve Gruber Show. Yeah, McDonald's not going anywhere, and you shouldn't either. We'll be right back.
The Steve Gruber Show, American Values with Midwestern Common Sense.
I began to find myself searching for shelter again and again.
You've probably seen Andy Parker by now.
Against the wind.
You've probably had the opportunity to see Andy Parker.
Little something against the wind.
He is the father of the young woman gunned down just shy of a week ago. The reporter there in Virginia, Allison Parker, the reporter shot, gunned down by her deranged former colleague. Andy Parker says it's time for stricter gun laws. He says they have messed with the wrong family. He says it's time for stricter gun laws. And so for me, I have to ask, what gun law would have worked here? I mean, if you're for gun control, then you're really not against guns because the guns will be needed to disarm other people. Makes sense, right? It's not that you're anti-gun. You'll need the police's guns to take away other people's guns, the military's guns to take away other people's guns. You're very pro-gun. You just believe that only the government, which is, of course, so reliable, honest, moral, and virtuous, should be allowed to have guns. No such thing as gun control, actually. There's centralizing gun ownership to the hands of the political elite and their foot soldiers. But when you talk of gun control, you talk of eliminating the private ownership of handguns and long guns and AR-15s. That's what you speak of. You speak of taking guns away from all of us, but not from the government. That is that's your real drive with gun ownership. But Andy Parker says it's time to eliminate gun ownership or to restrict. But I don't know of any law that would have changed that. Our good friend Dr. John Lott is here to discuss it in further detail. Doctor, welcome back to the program.
Great to talk to you, Steve.
It seems to me that whenever one of these tragedies occurs, and I empathize with Andy Parker, but to say that it's the NRA's fault, which he also asserted, this shooting in Virginia, I guess sometimes people just need someone else to blame.
Well, I mean, I understand the desire that he feels. I mean, at least I try to understand. And, I have 5 kids. I can't imagine what it'd be like to lose any of my kids. But, unfortunately, the expanded background checks that he's been pushing are completely irrelevant not only to his horrible case, but also to all the cases that the president keeps on putting forward. My own belief is the reason why they push this extended background checks, at least the president's part, is just to make it more costly for people to obtain guns. When in a place like Washington, D.C., it adds about $200 to the price of obtaining a gun. In New York, it adds about $80, and in Washington State, it adds $60 to $65 on the cost of getting a gun. And I think, if you ever go and talk to them and say, well, why not pay for those costs out of general revenue rather than making the person who's trying to obtain the gun pay it, they go apoplectic. It's a complete non-starter. They won't even think of doing that, even though they claim that there'll be reductions in crime that will benefit everybody, surely not just the guy who's buying the gun. And,
when did we...
But I think it just has to do, they believe that if they make it more costly for people to get guns, there'll be fewer guns out there.
Yeah, when did we stop when do we stop in America holding accountable the criminal and trying to blame society at large? I mean, that's just the way it comes across every time. And again, I empathize with the man. He lost his daughter in a horrible way, but to blame the National Rifle Association, come on.
Well, I mean, to me, the point is, if you really believe somebody's a danger to others, then you should lock them up. Just going and saying, we're not going to let you legally obtain a gun doesn't make much sense. I mean, it's kind of like saying, okay, we're not going to let you legally obtain drugs. Does anybody believe that you couldn't get illegal drugs if you wanted to? Does anybody believe that the gangs that provide the drugs, which have lots of guns, couldn't also supply guns to people? I mean, it just doesn't seem very logical. If people are a danger to others, rather than just saying, giving them 6 months or a year or a couple of years to go and find a weapon that they can use to do it. Because these guys plot these attacks long in advance. This killer in Virginia was apparently at least thinking about doing this attack for 2.5 months in advance. Yep. That's a long time.
It's a very long time to sit and ruminate and try to plan it out. Now, one of the places that won't have certain firearms going forward, from what I understand here, is Walmart. Walmart has decided to pull all AR-15 semi-automatic rifles from its store shelves. They say it's not a response to politics, but it makes me wonder, Doctor, what do you think?
Well, they say they're doing it because of drop-in ban. It just doesn't ring true to me. I mean, the AR-15 is still the most popular rifle in the United States. It's fallen somewhat from its peak in 2013. But overall, rifle sales are at the highest they've ever been. Gun sales, just generally, by looking at the mixed background checks over the last 3 months, are a record. You know, and these are phenomenal increases over what they were just a few years ago. So, you know, it's possible that Walmart, just unlike every other place that's selling guns, is just having a hard time selling them. But I'm kind of dubious about that. I mean, even if they're just doing mediocre, you would think that they have gun sales. These types of rifles are selling much better than they did a few years ago, and they weren't tempted because of lack of demand to stop selling them at that point. So I think there's something more going on. And,
I agree with you.
You know, you have these statements from the White House back in the beginning of 2013 about working with Walmart on pushing gun control stuff. You have different attempts by pension funds to divest themselves from Walmart because they've been selling these guns.
There's something going on here. Dr. John Lott, always a pleasure, from the Crime Prevention Research Center. You can find out more at crimeresearch.org.